Hi Mark, thanks for being with us today. So we're here today to talk about neurodiversity for Celebration Week. So I've got a number of questions. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
Perfect. So my first question to you, Mark, is do you have a personal and/or professional connection to neurodiversity?
Oh, well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you for asking the questions this afternoon, and thanks for spending time having this conversation. So in the professional capacity, I undertook the role, or started the role, as neurodiversity kind of lead, if you like, or kind of advocate back last autumn as part of the Vice-Chancellor's executive. There are a number of us, each with key roles across the wider university and connecting with various networks that are already in place across the university. And that's a really important thing to say, because there's fantastic work being done by staff networks, or colleagues like yourself who've done great work in terms of not just starting but embedding the staff networks across our university, and that really promotes, and starts to really highlight how diverse we are as an organisation. On a personal note, yes, so I was diagnosed with dyslexia in my early 30s, and I do identify as also being neurodiverse as well, and that diagnosis came kind of only a few years ago. So actually it's come quite late in my life, but actually an important part of this role for me is just promoting neurodiversity across the actual workplace, but also having a connection into the students' journey as well. So I think intrinsically, students and staff are connected through the nature of the learning and teaching and research that we do as well. So I have a professional and personal, I think, advocacy with this role.
Perfect, thank you, Mark. So how do you see your role then as the advocate?
So I think first and foremost, making the connection with you was brilliant. I knew about the work that you were leading, Sarah, in terms of being the co-chair of the Staff Neurodiversity Network. But actually, I think an important part of my role is to listen, I think, to lived experience. I may not have all the answers, but I think it's about making the connections, joining the dots sometimes, advocating, and that's a really important word to me. So advocating, whether it be at the Vice-Chancellor's executive, advocating in practice, externally, advocating across different staffing groups, which could include technicians, professional services, our academics and others as well. And I think also trying to understand, I think importantly, as things become more complex in the education space, and as things become, the current climate at the moment is a bit tough actually in terms of where the universities find themselves. But we've got great people who work in the university. It's about trying to support them the best that we can as well. And I include myself in that, and yourself in that as well, and help provide some fair and honest signposting and support where we can as well.
That's great, thanks Mark.
So Sarah, I was going to ask you about the Neurodiversity Staff Network, which you co-lead, and it's a great network. I think you've got many members. How did you come to join this network? What's your kind of role and what you do in this particular network itself?
Okay, so we've been going for about 2.5 years, Mark, and we felt at the time there was a real need for the network. People were reaching out to members of the community. So in that time, we've grown to just around 100 members, growing all the time. We meet at least monthly, sometimes online, sometimes face-to-face, depending on the needs of the group. Some of those are social events, and some of those are outside speakers, or we are discussing particular issues, etc. I'd also say that we see our role as advocates for the community to the exec at UWE and beyond. So there's a whole range of things that we do.
Well, it sounds like a massive kind of spectrum of activities and areas. And I do know from speaking to colleagues that they do value the support that you and the other co-chair provide within this space as well. And I think how it also couples and links across to other staff networks across the organisation as well. And, a massive thank you to you for coordinating the International Neurodiversity Celebration Week this week, which it is taking place all this week between the 18th and 24th of March. Lots of activities across the entire campus as well. So well done, and thank you for that as well. Sarah, what would you like to see happen through the network at the university in the future, or where do you see the staff network that you co-lead influence and shape what happens, particularly in reference to neurodiversity at UE Bristol?
So I could talk about this all day, but I'm not going to. I'd like to say 4 things here. As a community, we would like to see an anti-ableist strategy which supports neurodiversity at UWE and really looks at both direct and indirect forms of discrimination. We would also like to see a greater emphasis on sensory processing issues and consideration of some of our environment. Some of them are very harsh with very bright lighting, no dimmer switches, etc. That's an easy win, really. And that actually is something that is brought up a lot by our colleagues in professional services who have to hot desk, etc. So I think that needs to be looked at. We also know that representation is really important for marginalised groups. Representation and celebration. So we would like to see members of our community celebrated more widely and also represented at higher levels of the university as well. And finally, we would also like to see some attention given to the recruitment and strategies around progression within UWE, because this is often viewed as a barrier for success for our neurodivergent communities. So that needs to be something that could be addressed too.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. And I think a lot of those do cover the people, place and purpose agenda, don't they, across the university? And it's, you know, whether it's it can appear sometimes to be a small thing like a dimmer switch, but for someone working in that environment can mean the world to them in terms of having that right.
Absolutely. One final question for you, Mark, and that is, what are the plans for the future to support the neurodivergent community, particularly in relation to well-being?
Yes, I think in short is the answer, Sarah, and this is ongoing work, and I think, you know, the advocates through the Vice-Chancellor Executive is one example about where it's about getting immersed out and about with colleagues across different networks, but it goes wider than this. This is about the health and well-being agenda of the university, making sure that we do have, whether it's a policy and or appreciation, understanding and learning when things perhaps don't go as well as what we hoped, to make UE Bristol as inclusive as it can be for the diverse population. And that goes for me right from the pre-onboarding of new staff, for example, in terms of how we set out the interview questions, who the panel might be, to the onboarding, to the successful completion of probation, for example, or for existing staff, it's about giving them the best possible access to tools, access to support that can help them do their job to the best of their ability. Because at the end of the day, we want to try and enable people and also empower them as well. And if we can remove some of the constraints that you mentioned earlier, I think then that's a positive thing as well. I think it's not always sometimes an easy road to travel, because there's also something for me, I think personally, about culture and also about how we ensure that everyone understands that not everyone is neurotypical, and that we do understand, just like we do for other protected characteristics, we understand that a mixed and culturally rich environment that's diverse makes the best type of organisation.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for your time.
You're welcome.